So increase cost control by managing direct purchases. That is today's topic in this webinar. So we're going to do a summary of the first webinar that we had in this series, where we talked more about theory and the theoretical parts of this. And then we're going to dig into some different purchase categories, and then we're going to do a demo in our application that is called Rillion Prime. So first, I just want to go through this with different type of purchases and different type of categories and ways to buy things, and just set that on the map before we go into the details. So just to summarize that. When we talk about purchases, we talk about purchases for direct material and indirect material. We often also talk about...
Maria.
Oh, yes.
Sorry, your screen isn't...
I'm so
moving.
sorry. I saw that. I will go back and take it. I will see. Let's see. Does it move now?
Yeah,
Good.
It does. Thank you.
So this is the increased cost control by managing indirect purchases. And this is the agenda. To go through a summary first, go through some different purchase categories, and then a demo. And the different purchase categories are then, as I said, direct purchases and indirect purchases. And we also have something that is called maverick buying. And maverick buying is those like when you just go to a store and buy things on the fly. So it's very hard to get control over those purchases. But it's important to get control over all other type of purchases. And if we start with the direct purchases or direct procurement, that are things that you are buying into your like production process, things you're buying in to produce whatever you're producing or delivering or selling or so on. Those are often things that you also have on the warehouse. You need to keep track on how many things you have on stock. So that's very like, it's very important that you have full control over this process. And due to that, you also often have good processes in place. You have very clear like responsibilities in the process, who is doing what. And very often those purchase systems also includes like automatic purchases. So meaning that if you do not have enough of a specific item on stock, the system could automatically generate a purchase order and order some new things. So that are things that is more direct procurement. And as I said, very often you already have good control over this process in the company. But when it comes to the indirect procurement, it's more often that you don't have control. So what could we include within the indirect procurement? I mean, that is everything else that you're buying. Things that is like non-stock items. You don't keep them on the warehouse and keep track on how many you have of those pens or whatever you have. It's things that you are buying into the office, like facility management, and services that you are buying. Everything that you buy as a service, I mean, it's still a purchase. Marketing material, maintenance, IT-related costs, all of those are typically like indirect procurements that you are doing. And it's very often there is no or very weak, I would say, processes for this in the company. It's not in a structured way. It's not done in a structured way. And it's very unclear who is responsible for those different type of purchases. Yeah, you might have contracts in place, but are we actually buying according to those contracts? Yes, maybe we do have someone that is responsible, but is he actually always involved with those purchases? So that is what we're going to dig into today. I did take in this picture as well. I think this tells quite good also the difference between direct and indirect purchases. So the definition of direct is more like cost for doing business. Like what do we need to buy in to be able to produce the car or whatever we are going to sell to our customers. And indirect is more like cost for us to be able to be in business. For example, I need a computer to be able to do my work. It is just a tool that I need to have, but I need to buy a new computer if mine is broken. So that is more like indirect. So things that you need to have to be able to actually be there as a company. And if you look at the consumers here, the things that you are buying in as direct procurement is very often going to be facing like the customers, the clients in the end, whilst the indirect procurements are more for the internal stakeholders, for us as employees. And if we look at the number of suppliers and number of categories, I think this is quite interesting to look at, because the number of suppliers and categories are quite low when it comes to direct procurements. It's not that many different categories, and you have a few vendors that you have agreements with to buy things in for your production chain, so to say. But when it comes to the indirect, it's very often that you have very many suppliers and a lot of different categories. And this is what you need to start to get control over. And also, last year but not least, the value and the spend. Yeah, I think you have much more money, of course, when it comes to like the direct procurement, more spend, more value. But you shouldn't like still, I mean, also for the indirect, it's quite a lot of money that we are spending. So if you do an analysis of this, you can see that's a lot of money that we actually are buying things that are more like indirect. So it's important to get down the costs and also get down so we are buying from the correct suppliers and categories. So this is what we're going to look into and how we can do this. So different type of companies and industries have different type of categories. So these are just some purchase categories, and some of those could be direct procurement for one company, but it could be indirect procurement for another. So I mean, this will differ from customer to customer, but it's important to analyze the categories that you are buying. What are we buying today into the company? What is direct and what is indirect? And do a grouping of that to be able to analyze first. And just as some examples here, like if you go to health and social care, the purchase categories here is of course like medicines and sanitary supplies and equipment that you have, you need to maintain that and so on. So those kind of purchases, those is not things that you have on stock. So yeah, maybe it's for your everyday business and facing the customers, but it's not like things you have on stock to keep track on. Yeah, maybe the medicine, so that could be direct purchases, but the rest, it's more like services and things to get the business to work. If you go to manufacturing industry, here you often have a lot of direct purchases. I mean, you need to buy chemicals and metals and all of that to keep the business running, to produce whatever you're producing. But you also need to get control over like the rent of premises and, I don't know, containers and services, production services. All of that is also something that you should have control over. And it's very often that those are not supported to have in like big purchase system for direct purchases. Food industry, same here. I mean, different categories could be like workwear, waste disposal, cleaning, and other kind of services, maintenance of equipments that you have, so on and so on. And of course, the food that you buy in, for example, but that is more direct purchases. If we go to the process. So if you go to the purchase process, everything starts, of course, with a budget. You need to have a budget to be able to spend the company's money. And that budget needs to get approved. And I would say all companies do have a budget. So I'm not trying to teach you how to create a budget in any way. But it's important to have the budget available when you are starting to buy things to make sure that you actually have a budget for whatever you would like to buy. So if we go down one step, now we have the budget, and now I have a need to buy some things. So I'm a person in the organization that would like to buy some services or items or whatever it is, then I should raise a purchase request. Requisition. I would like to buy some things. And those things needs to be approved by people in the organization. We need to have a process for each and every of those categories that we are buying. Who is approving? Who needs to review? So we need to have an approval and a review of this. And we also need to make sure that there is money in the budget. When we have an approval, then we also have a purchase order that we could communicate with our suppliers and vendors. So we can send those orders like an email, we can call them, we can send them via a system, but no matter how we do it, we have something that we can communicate with our suppliers. When they have received the order, they will hopefully deliver the goods that we have ordered from them, and then you have a delivery step. And the approval and the delivery step, those are very important for the next step, because when we have received the goods, the supplier will send us an invoice. So when we do get an invoice in to the company, it can come into an invoice handling solution as ours, like we have the Rillion Prime invoice automation solution, but it could be any other as well. We have the invoice coming in, and if there is then a purchase order in the system, we could match that invoice to the purchase order. And here it doesn't matter if the purchase order is coming from like a big purchase order system like SAP or whatever, or coming from a requisition tool, as I'm going to show you soon. So it doesn't matter if it's indirect or direct material. You should have an approved purchase before you buy things. So if we do have the PO matching in place here, then those invoices that are according to the purchase order could be booked and paid automatically. There is no need to look at those invoices. And only if there is a variance, then we need to review the invoices. So this is the process that we're going to look into, but I will show you this in the application instead of just showing a lot of slides. So for those of you that are not using our application today, Rillion Prime, there will be some slides here that, or some images here that you have not seen before, but this is our tool for the AP process. So here we can do everything from purchase to pay, creating requisitions, handling purchase orders, receiving invoices, matching and booking and the payment. So this is how it could look like for me. If I go in, if I have a need, I need to buy something. Maybe it's that my phone is broken. I need a phone in my daily work, so I need a phone, I need it quite quickly. So I need an approval. I need someone to say, okay, for me to buy this phone. So what I do is to go in and create a requisition. And then we have this with the purchase categories, as we talked about before. So what categories do you have that you need to have in the system? Those could be set up, and you could also break it down to subcategories to make it easier for your end users to find what they are searching for. So if I would like to buy a new phone, it would be good to know from what vendors we are buying those phones. And then we can see I have Dustin here as a preferred supplier. Could have been more than one, and then you could have one that is preferred, for example. So then I know that we are buying phones from Dustin. That's great. So we could also see that I actually do have some items. So it's possible to work with items. When you talk about like phones, then you often have items. It's easier to look at. It's especially it's easier for me as an end user. I need a phone, and it would be nice to know what phones I could choose from. And it looks like we have decided on an iPhone here. Yes, this looks good. I would like to buy a phone and some leather case here as well to that phone. So what we have done in our application is to build like a web shop where the company's vendors are available and also the categories. And if you would like to, then you could also add items. But this is just to make it easier for the end users to create the requisition. So then I have a shopping basket up here with a value, and this is what needs to be approved. But everything is not like an item. As I said, also service orders should be approved before you actually spend the money. So let's look at one of those categories. Like if you go to real estate and services here, let's say the elevator is broken. Of course, that's not an item. I don't want to buy a totally new elevator. I just want to have some service on the one we already have. So then instead of having items, we could create a form, because here we need to communicate much more information with the supplier so they understand what they are to deliver to us, what kind of service they are to deliver. And now I couldn't spell either. Sorry for that. Just type it like that. So where to do this? And contact Maria when you're going to deliver this. And also maybe when should this have been done? Yesterday would have been nice, but that's very tricky. So let's say it must be done tomorrow, so we don't have to run up all those stairs. So that's another type of requisition. When you do it as a service, then you have a form. When you have items in the application, as I showed with the phone, for example, this will require for maintenance of items. So then you also need to have someone in charge per category to make sure that we have items in there available and that those prices are updated regularly. And that could be done either by like you do an import from your suppliers or that you manually change the prices and keep control over those items. That of course depends on how many items you have. But another way also to do a purchase is, let's say I still need a phone. I don't like the iPhone, let's say. So I know we are buying phones from Dustin. And then sometimes it's required to have what we call a full free text requisition. It's not a form, it's just a full free text with a lot of fields that you could fill in, saying, let's say I need a Samsung instead. Well, you can have some extended order text and so on. The free text orders are also very good to use when you're buying services, because here you can also like have attachments and documents that needs to follow with the purchase order, so that we really can communicate with the suppliers what we would like to buy from them. So different type of purchases will be done in different ways. So everything from free text, forms, or items that is available in an application like this. But let's go to the next step. So this is a view that will show what will happen in Rillion Prime. Because when I create a requisition, I'm the one that would like to buy things. The purpose of having this kind of application in place was to get an approval and get people to review it before we actually are buying the things. So what we can help with here is to create those workflows. So who needs to do the financial approval? So this is my manager, so the manager role for the consultant one, as for example. And we also have the IT manager, because he's the responsible purchaser for phones, for example. So he needs to review this before we actually communicate with Dustin that we would like to buy a phone from them. Because it could be that he sees, well, we actually already have some phones. Somebody was returning the phone when he was leaving the company a week ago. So then we could stop this purchase from being done. But let's look at that later on in the process. So this is what I would like to buy. And then if this is sent out to a workflow, then the people in the organization that needs to review this will get an email that there are requisitions that they need to approve. And they can go into the application or via the mobile phone and approve, or they could also reject. So if I, as the manager here, say, well, if Maria needs a new phone, then she needs a new phone. Okay, good. And the elevator service, I don't know if she's the one that actually should order that, but fine. If it's broken, it's broken, and let's fix it. But he could reject or he could approve. And we can then see that who did create it, where it is right now. I'm the one that needs to do the financial approval, and then it will go to the IT manager. What the system also have done is to create a coding. So we will book the cost for the mobile phone on the correct GL account, that it will be on the correct department or cost center, because we know who this role belongs to. So we will do the coding. But let's approve this, and it will go to the IT manager. So the IT manager in this process will be the last person in to approve or reject. So once again, if the IT manager says, now we actually do have, that was IT chef, that was not IT manager. I'm sorry for that. I have not a lot of rows. Let's go in here. So if the IT manager sees, yeah, we do have a phone. No, Maria, sorry, you don't need this. We can buy the leather case because the other one was doesn't look so nice. So let's buy that, but you will get the phone. So then we can communicate back to the person creating this that, sorry, we already have a phone, but you can get that instead. So we don't have to spend the money. But the other ones could be approved. When everybody in this workflow have approved, then what the system could do then automatically is to generate a purchase order. And that is what we are to communicate with the suppliers. So here we did buy from 2 different vendors. So of course we will have 2 different purchase orders. And those could be sent either automatically to the supplier, or we can take out an order form and contact the supplier and say, yes, we have an approval to buy a service of the elevator from you. Please help us out here. So this is the process. So what we get here is that we can guide the end users so they are buying from the vendors where we do have an agreement. We will make sure that we do get an approval before we spend the money. And we can also get big help when the invoice arrives in the next step so that we can compare and match the invoice to the purchase order. And if that is okay, well, then we could just pay the invoice because we have moved the process of the approval to where it actually belongs before we spend the money. So this is how it could look like in Rillion Prime. Of course, there are many other systems on the market as well, but it's very important to start get control over the purchases because that's the way that you could actually get control over the cost. There is, if you don't have the possibility to stop the purchases in time, then of course it's hard to get control over the cost. And also, as I said, to get people to buy from the vendors where we actually do have an agreement. Just that will save a lot of time and money.